The snow had been falling since noon, and by 3 o'clock it had swallowed the road entirely. Evelyn Carter's black SUV sat crooked at the edge of the gravel lane, one tire kissing the ditch, hazard lights blinking orange against the white. She stood outside it in a charcoal wool coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent, her heels punching through the crust of ice with each step. The cold didn't care who she was. It bit her cheeks and slid under her collar and made her eyes water. 30 yards ahead, a man was splitting wood. He didn't look up when she approached. The axe rose and fell clean, unhurried. A woodpile taller than her shoulders stood to his left. He wore a canvas jacket patched at the elbows, work boots that had seen 3 winters at least, and nothing on his head despite the temperature. His breath came out in slow clouds. She stopped 6 feet away. "Are you Daniel Hayes?" He set the axe against the stump, turned to look at her. His face was steady, the kind of face that had learned not to react too quickly to anything. "Depends on who's asking. My name is Evelyn Carter." She let the name land. It usually did something. He blinked once. Nothing more. "I need a husband. By tomorrow morning." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked the axe back up. "Wrong address, Mr. Hayes. You can use the porch to call a tow truck." He nodded toward the house. "It's warmer." She didn't move. "I'm offering you $300,000. The axe stopped mid-swing. He set it down slowly this time, and when he turned back to her, something in his eyes had shifted, not greed, not excitement. Something more like recognition, like a man who had learned to identify a trap by the way the light hit it. "Lady," he said quietly, "you don't know me at all. I know enough. Then you know the answer is no." He picked up the axe. "There's a blanket on the porch railing. Use it while you wait." She stood in the snow for another 3 seconds, which, for Evelyn Carter, was the longest she had stood still in years, and then she said, almost without meaning to, "If I don't have a husband by tomorrow, I lose my company." He paused, and that pause was the crack in the door. Small, but it was there. "Then I suppose," he said, very quietly, "you'd better tell me what you're actually asking." The wind shifted. Snow scattered sideways between them. "I'm asking you to kiss me," she said. "Right now." "So I know you can." He looked at her like she was either the bravest person he'd ever met or the most reckless. Then, unhurried as everything else about him, Daniel Hayes stepped forward. The Hayes property sat 3 miles off the main Aspen Road, up a lane that the county only plowed when it felt like it. Most of their neighbors had sold years ago, taken the ski resort money and moved somewhere warmer. Daniel had stayed because the land was paid for, because Lily had learned to walk in the kitchen of this house, and because leaving felt like admitting that the worst thing had won. He woke at 5:30 every morning, even in December. The wood stove needed feeding before anything else. Then, coffee dark, 2 cups, standing at the window while the sky went from black to gray to the pale, indifferent blue of a mountain winter. Then the barn, then Lily, then whatever the day required. The day usually required quite a lot. He picked up work where he could find it. Fencing in the fall. Snow removal in winter. Odd jobs for the vacation rental properties that multiplied every year along the valley, replacing a furnace here, patching a roof there. He was good with his hands, and he didn't overcharge, and word got around. It was enough. Not comfortable, but enough. Lily was 6. She had her mother's eyes large and brown, with that quality of watching everything carefully before deciding what to think about it. She went to school in town on the days the road was passable, and on the days it wasn't, they did lessons at the kitchen table. Reading, numbers, the names of birds. She had recently become fascinated by cardinals. There was one that came to the feeder outside the window, and she'd named him Gerald, and she reported on Gerald's activities with the seriousness of a field biologist. Gerald was here twice today, she'd told him that morning, climbing onto her chair for breakfast. I think he's worried about the storm. Gerald's fine. Daniel set oatmeal in front of her. He's a bird. He knows what to do. What if he doesn't have enough seeds? We filled the feeder yesterday. She considered this, pulling the oatmeal toward her. On the refrigerator behind her, held by a strawberry magnet, was a drawing she'd done last week. 3 figures in a house. One tall with yellow hair that was Daniel, one small with brown curls herself, and one figure, slightly faded from where she'd drawn and redrawn it, with a different kind of outline than the others. That one didn't have a name written under it. Daniel knew who it was. He didn't say anything about the drawing. He never did. He just made sure it stayed on the refrigerator, because taking it down felt like closing something that maybe shouldn't be closed yet. Claire had died 22 months ago. Black ice on Route 82, coming home from the grocery store, a Wednesday afternoon in February. The kind of accident that had no drama to it, no warning, no reason, nothing to point at and say, this is why. A truck crossed the center line. That was all. 29 years old, and then the world was different. Daniel had learned to grieve quietly, the way he did most things. He got up every morning, he fed the stove, he fed his daughter. He did not, as his mother had worried he would, disappear into the bottle or the bitterness. He just got narrower, more careful. He kept the things that mattered close and let everything else go. He was not unhappy. Unhappiness felt like a luxury he hadn't earned the right to. He was, mostly, tired. And mostly, he was fine. The afternoon Evelyn Carter arrived. He'd been stacking wood since noon, working through the gray chill with the particular focus of a man who thinks best when his hands are busy. He'd been running the numbers again. The truck needed new brake lines. Lily's snow boots had developed a leak. The furnace in cabin 7, which he maintained for the Hargrove vacation rental, was making a noise it hadn't made last winter. He was thinking about the brake lines when the black SUV appeared at the end of the lane. He watched it come without stopping his work. Expensive car. New plates. Someone lost. Most likely the GPS systems always got confused out here, sending people down private roads in search of ski resorts that were miles away. When the woman got out and started walking toward him, he revised his assessment. Not lost. Deliberate. She was tall and composed, even in heels in the snow, and she moved the way people moved when they were used to rooms making space for them. Her coat was the kind of gray that cost money to achieve. Her hair was dark and pulled back and not a strand out of place despite the wind. She stopped the right distance away, not too close, someone who understood physical space. And then she told him her name and told him she needed a husband and offered him $300,000. And Daniel Hayes looked at Evelyn Carter and felt, under the tiredness and the calculation, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. She followed him onto the porch. He didn't invite her in, not yet, but he handed her the blanket from the railing without comment, and he leaned against the post and crossed his arms and said, "Talk." She talked. Her father, Richard Carter, had built Carter Development into one of the 5 largest commercial real estate firms in the country. 3 years ago, before the diagnosis, he'd amended his will. The amendment included a clause his lawyer had called it the partnership provision requiring that Evelyn be legally married before she could assume full control of the company upon his death. Richard Carter had died 11 days ago. "He thought I was too isolated," Evelyn said. She said it without bitterness, which told Daniel she'd already processed the bitterness some time ago. "He thought running a company was the only thing I had. He wanted to make sure I had something else before he gave it to me. Sounds like he knew you pretty well. He knew me imperfectly and loved me conditionally." She held the blanket around her shoulders with both hands. "The provision gives me 30 days from the date of death to satisfy the condition. That was 11 days ago. The probate filing goes through tomorrow morning at 9, and if you don't meet the condition, control transfers to the board. My Uncle Victor has 3 of the 7 seats. He's been waiting for this for 15 years. Daniel watched the snow. "Why me?" I needed someone with no media exposure, no business connections, no reason to be recognized. She met his eyes. Someone who wouldn't be traced back to any of my professional relationships. Someone who would be credible as a private choice. You fit the profile. Profile. He let the word sit. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you did a background check on me. I did. He was quiet for a moment. That's a strange kind of desperation. Yes. He studied her. Not the way men sometimes studied Evelyn, measuring, calculating, looking for angles. He looked at her the way he looked at weather, reading what was real, not what he hoped to find. You said kiss you. Why? Because I need to know if you can be convincing. The board has seen me in every professional context for 15 years. If this doesn't look real, I meant why the word kiss. He tilted his head slightly. You could have said shake my hand or look me in the eye or a dozen other things. You said kiss. She blinked. And for just a fraction of a second, the composure went somewhere else. I don't know, she said, which was probably the most honest thing she'd said since arriving. He looked at her for a long moment. Then the screen door opened and a small person appeared in pajama pants and a sweater that said Colorado on it in fading letters. Dad, said Lily, squinting at the visitor. Who's that? A lady whose car is stuck. Lily considered Evelyn with great seriousness. You're cold, she said. A little, Evelyn admitted. Lily disappeared back inside and returned 30 seconds later with a knitted wool scarf, orange and red and slightly uneven, the kind made by someone learning. She held it out. I made this, she said. It's okay if you borrow it. Evelyn looked down at the scarf and something crossed her face, something that wasn't performance. She crouched to Lily's level, which ruined her coat hem in the slush, and took the scarf gently. Thank you, she said. What's your name? Lily Hayes. I'm Evelyn. That's a long name. It is. Most people call me Evelyn anyway. Lily seemed to find this acceptable. She looked up at her father. Can she stay for dinner? Daniel looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Daniel. I'll call a tow truck, she said. Roads will be closed by dark, he said. Storm's coming in tonight. They won't send anyone out. He paused. You can stay in the spare room. There are no conditions attached to that. She straightened up. The orange scarf was still in her hands. And the other matter? I'll give you my answer in the morning. He opened the screen door. Come inside before the cold gets worse. The house was small and warm and almost aggressively real. Evelyn had been inside expensive houses, historic houses. Houses decorated by professionals who billed by the hour. This house had a wood stove with a cracked handle wired shut with a twist of metal. It had a kitchen table with 4 chairs, one of which had a wobble that Daniel fixed without thinking by folding a piece of cardboard under the leg when she sat down. It had crayon drawings on the refrigerator and a stack of library books on the coffee table and a dog-eared copy of a Peterson Field Guide open to the cardinal page. It smelled like wood smoke and coffee and something baking. Cornbread, Daniel said, when he caught her looking toward the oven. Lily's request. She sat at the table while he cooked a real meal. Not a complicated one, but assembled with care. Beans with smoked sausage, cornbread, a salad that Lily helped make by tearing lettuce into a bowl, with the focused gravity of a child performing surgery. Evelyn watched them move around each other in the kitchen, the small choreography of people who know each other's rhythms. She could not remember the last time she had watched 2 people cook. You're staring, Lily said, not unkindly. I'm sorry. I don't usually see this. See what? Evelyn thought about it. A kitchen, she said, finally. Being used. Lily tilted her head. Where do you eat? Restaurants, mostly. Or at my desk. That sounds lonely. Lily, Daniel said. I'm not being rude, Lily said. I'm just saying it sounds lonely. Evelyn looked at the child. It is, a little, she said. After dinner, after Lily was in bed, they sat by the wood stove with coffee. The storm had arrived, wind against the glass, snow ticking at the windows. The power flickered once and held. Daniel put another log in. "Tell me why you don't want the money," Evelyn said. "I didn't say I don't want it." He settled back into the chair. "I said the answer was no. Those aren't the same thing." "Then why?" He thought for a moment. "Because $300,000 for pretending to be your husband doesn't fix anything. It just replaces one problem with another one. It fixes the problem of Lily's school fees. And your truck, and the cabin 7 furnace." He looked at her. "You really did your homework. I'm good at my job. What happened to the rest of it?" "The kiss test?" She looked into the coffee cup. "You passed," she said. "When you didn't react to the money," he almost smiled. "That's not what I was expecting you to say." "What were you expecting?" "I don't know. Something about chemistry." She looked at him directly. "I'm 34 years old, and I've been running a billion-dollar company since I was 29. I know the difference between chemistry and strategy." She paused. "What I was testing for was whether you could be surprised without being destabilized. Because everything that's about to happen is going to be surprising, and I need a person who doesn't fall over when the ground moves." He was quiet for a moment. And you split wood while I offered you $300,000. A pause. "You'll do." He laughed, a short, genuine sound, and she startled slightly, as if unexpected laughter was something she'd forgotten to include in her calculations. "Tell me about your uncle," he said. She told him. Victor Carter was 61, had joined the company's board 14 years ago through a process of maneuver and attrition, and had spent the subsequent decade positioning himself for exactly this moment. He had the votes, the lawyers, and the patience of a man who believed history was on his side. He was not, Evelyn believed, wrong to believe that not if she went into tomorrow alone. "He'll investigate me," Daniel said. "He will. He'll find out about Claire. And Lily." "Yes." Her voice was even. "I want you to know that I won't let anything happen to your daughter's custody arrangement. That's in writing, if you want it." He looked at her for a long time. "Who hurt you?" he asked. She blinked. "I beg your pardon? You're offering legal protections for my kid before I've even agreed." "That's not strategy. That's someone who's been hurt the same way, offering the thing they wish someone had offered them." The fire popped. The wind rattled the north window. "My father," she said, after a moment, "he wasn't cruel. He just made it very clear that the company came first. Always. I understood it. I accepted it." She looked at the fire. "I built my whole life around it." And then he added the condition. And then he added the condition. Something small moved in her face, which means he knew, the whole time, that I'd accepted something I shouldn't have. And he waited until he was dying to say so. Maybe he thought it was the kindest way. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. "It was still an act of love," Daniel said, "even if the execution was bad." She looked at him. "You sound like you've thought about this." "I have a 6-year-old who looks at an empty space in a family drawing and doesn't know what to put there," he said. "I think about love and bad execution a lot." They sat with that for a while. The fire settled. Outside, the storm pressed against the house like something trying to get in, and didn't. Eventually, Evelyn said, "I'll increase the offer." "Stop." "Thor." I said stop. Not harsh. Just final. "Let me ask you something." She waited. "If I do this, and I haven't said yes, what are you actually asking for?" "Be specific." She was quiet for a moment, recalibrating. "A legal marriage. Brief. You'd attend the board meeting where the condition is certified. You'd stand next to me publicly for as long as the probate review requires. After that, she met his eyes. "After that, you're free to do whatever you want." He nodded slowly. "Sleep on it," she said, and rose from the chair. "Already decided," he said. She stopped. "Yes," he said. "I'll do it." She stood very still. Just like that, you're out of time. And your uncle sounds like someone who'll go after Lily just to make a point. He set his coffee cup down. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because I've met Victor Carters before. Small ones. Men who use other people's kids as leverage. His jaw tightened briefly. I don't like them. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted, not gratitude exactly. Something more complicated than that. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet, he said. You haven't seen me in a room full of lawyers. The marriage license was filed at 8:15 the next morning, 29 minutes before the probate window closed. The ceremony was brief and administrative, in a county clerk's office with fluorescent lights and a silk plant in the corner. Lily stood between them, holding both their hands, solemn as a small judge. When the clerk said, "You may kiss the bride," Daniel looked at Evelyn and she looked at him, and it was strange and quiet, and neither of them made it more than it was, which somehow made it more than they expected. They drove back to the house after. That afternoon, Daniel's phone lit up. It was a number he didn't recognize. The text was 12 words. Enjoy your 15 minutes. The review will find what I need. V. He showed it to Evelyn without comment. She read it. Then she said, "He's faster than I expected." He was waiting. Yes. She typed something on her own phone. My lawyer will need to speak with you today. You'll need to be prepared for the review process. What does that involve? Questions, investigators, possibly press. She looked up. Daniel, whatever they dig up about your finances, your record, there's nothing to dig up. Everyone has something. I have brake lines that need replacing and a furnace that's on its last season. He looked out the window. That's about the size of it. She nodded. Then, after a moment, he'll try the custody angle. I know, he has no grounds. But he'll manufacture the appearance of grounds. He'll suggest instability, financial difficulty, isolated environment. Evelyn. He turned from the window. I've been Lily's father her entire life. I've been her only parent for nearly 2 years. There is no judge in this county who doesn't know that. He was quiet. Let him try. She studied him. You're not frightened. I'm frightened all the time, he said, simply. I just don't let it make decisions for me. She was supposed to leave after the paperwork was certified. She didn't. She told herself it was strategic being seen locally, building a narrative, giving the investigators less to question. She had her laptop. She had her phone. She could run Carter Development from a wood stove if she had to. She stayed. The first week, she stayed out of the way. She worked from the kitchen table while Daniel was in the barn or out on jobs. And she listened to Lily's detailed reports on Gerald, the cardinal, and she learned that the wobble in the kitchen table returned if you didn't replace the cardboard every few days. The second week, she started drifting toward the barn in the afternoons. You don't have to help, Daniel said, the first time she appeared in the doorway with her sleeves rolled up. I know, she said, and stepped inside. He taught her to stack wood, not complicated, but specific. You had to think about the weight distribution, the airflow. You couldn't just pile. She was bad at it the first afternoon and better the second, and by the third, she was doing it without thinking. Lily taught her to make cornbread. This involved a great deal of supervision from Lily, who had strong opinions about the amount of butter. More, Lily said. This is already a significant amount of butter. More, Lily said. She added more butter. The cornbread was extraordinary. She and Daniel did not talk about feelings. They talked about practical things, the legal process, the board meeting schedule, the names of the horses in the corral, one gray called Hester, one brown called Captain, one unreasonably opinionated small pony called Earl, who had a habit of leaning his entire body weight against the fence post and watching people with the expression of a philosopher who had seen it all. They talked about Lily's school, and about the cabin maintenance jobs, and about the history of the property. Daniel had bought it 8 years ago with Claire, when land was cheaper, and their optimism was the purest thing they owned. He told the story without flinching, which she noticed. Most people flinched when they talked about the dead. He didn't. He said Claire's name the way you say the name of a place you love that you can't visit anymore. With clarity, with respect, and without pretending the distance wasn't real. Once, late one evening, she mentioned a book she'd seen on the coffee table, and that conversation went on for 2 hours without either of them noticing the time. "You've read all of these?" she asked, gesturing at the shelf. "Most of them twice. Fiction? Everything. You have a preference?" She thought about it. "I don't really read for pleasure anymore." He was quiet. "That's not sad," she said. "I just got out of the habit." "Pick one," he said, nodding at the shelf. "I wouldn't know what." "Pick one." She stood up and walked to the shelf and stood there for a moment and then pulled out a worn paperback. He looked at the spine. "Good choice," he said. She sat back down and opened it. He put another log in the stove. They read in silence for an hour. It was, Evelyn thought, one of the most peaceful hours she could remember. She did not analyze it. She just let it be. What she couldn't let be, what was harder to file away, was the way Lily looked at her after the second week. Not with the polite curiosity of the first days, but with something warmer and more proprietary. Lily had started reaching for her hand without thinking about it. Had started calling for her from upstairs with questions. "Evelyn, do cardinals fly south?" And Evelyn, "Is 300 a lot of money?" And Evelyn, "What's a board meeting?" She answered every question as honestly as she could. The one she couldn't answer was the one Lily never quite asked, but was asking all the time, with those quiet, watching eyes. "Are you going to stay?" He came in person. Of course he did. A town car appeared at the end of the lane on a Thursday afternoon, 14 days after the marriage. Victor Carter was 61 and silver-haired, and had the particular smoothness of a man who had spent decades being underestimated and knew how to use it. He got out of the car. He looked at the house. He smiled. Daniel was in the barn. He came out when he heard the car and stood in the corral gate and watched Victor walk toward the house, and something cold and steady moved through him. Victor saw him. Stopped. Reassessed. Mr. Hayes. Friendly. Warm. Utterly false. "I hope I'm not intruding." "You are," Daniel said. "But come in anyway." Victor's smile widened a fraction. He did not like being given permission. He had expected to grant it. Evelyn was at the kitchen table when they walked in. She looked up from her laptop. Her face did not change. "Victor." "Evelyn." He looked around the kitchen with the specific gaze of a man cataloging weaknesses. "Charming. Sit down," she said. "Or leave. Either is fine with me." He sat. What followed was not a conversation. It was a series of calibrated threats delivered in the vocabulary of concern. He was worried about the circumstances of the marriage. He was concerned about the stability of the environment for a child of Lily's age. He had spoken to attorneys who raised questions about the validity of a contract marriage in the context of the provision's intent. He had materials that he felt the board should review before certifying the condition. Daniel sat at the table and said nothing. Evelyn said, also calmly. Victor produced a folder. Inside were financial records, Daniel's, going back 4 years. They showed, accurately, that he had sometimes struggled, that there had been 2 months, after Claire died, when he'd missed a property tax payment, that he drove a truck with 140,000 miles on it. "This," Victor said, "is the man you chose to marry." "Yes," Evelyn said. Victor looked at Daniel. "And you, Mr. Hayes, what exactly do you get out of this arrangement?" Daniel met his eyes. "A family," he said. Victor blinked. That wasn't the answer he'd prepared for. "I meant financially." "I know what you meant." Daniel's voice was even. "My answer stands." Victor recovered quickly. He always did. The custody review will go through by Monday, he said, standing. I'd recommend being prepared to demonstrate that this household provides adequate— Get off my property, Daniel said. Not loudly, not angrily, the way you say a true thing. Victor looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Evelyn. You've made a mistake, he said. I've made several, she said. This isn't one of them. She came to him that night. Not romantically, she knocked on the workshop door where he was fixing the brake lines, standing in the cold doorway in her coat, and she said, He filed the custody challenge. It went through an hour ago. Daniel set down the wrench. What grounds? Financial instability. Environmental concerns. He has a psychologist on retainer who's agreed to raise questions about grief processing and single-parent coping mechanisms. Her voice was controlled, but the control cost something. Daniel, I'm sorry. I knew he might go here. I told you he might. But knowing and— Stop apologizing. This is my fault. I said stop. He looked at her. Lily is fine. I'm fine. Victor Carter challenging my parenting doesn't change either of those facts. It just means we have to respond. He paused. What does your lawyer say? She says he has no case. But she also says that no case and no damage aren't the same thing. A hearing like this, even a dismissed one, can generate coverage. And coverage shapes perception. He nodded. She leaned against the doorframe. The cold came in around her. He found a contact at a media outlet, she said. There's going to be a story about you. About the circumstances of our marriage. She met his eyes. About the money I offered you. He was quiet. They'll make it look like you did this for $300,000. I didn't take $300,000. They don't know that. He picked the wrench back up, turned it in his hands, set it down again. Lily, he said. Just her name. It held everything. She won't see it. She'll hear about it at school. Kids repeat what their parents say. His jaw was tight. She's 6. She doesn't need to be explaining her father to other people's children. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, quietly, What do you want to do? He looked at her. What do you want to do? I want to go to the board meeting Monday and end this. Then we go to the board meeting Monday and end it. Daniel, Evelyn. He looked at her steadily. I know what I signed up for. So do you. A pause. Go sleep. We'll drive up to the city Sunday night. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, something that surprised both of them. I don't want to leave. He didn't say anything. I know that wasn't part of the plan, she said. I know this is. She stopped, started again. This house is the first place in a long time where I felt like I could breathe. I know, he said. That's not nothing. No, he said. It's not. They stood in the cold doorway, the wind moving between them, not moving toward each other and not moving away, and both of them understood that whatever this was, it was no longer a contract. The Carter Development Conference Room occupied the northeast corner of the 43rd floor and had glass walls and a view of lower Manhattan that cost roughly as much as Daniel's house per square foot per year. He stood at the window and looked out and felt, remarkably, fine. Lily was with his mother in Aspen the first time she'd stayed there without him, which she had accepted with the pragmatism of a child who understood that adults sometimes had to do things before breakfast. She had extracted a promise that he would call at 7 and that he would bring back a pretzel from the city, the kind with the big salt. He had promised both. The room filled up. There were 7 board members, 3 lawyers, a recording secretary, and 2 people he didn't recognize, who were eventually identified as Victor's private investigators. Victor himself came in last, as people who intend to make an entrance always do. Evelyn entered with her lawyer, Margaret Briggs, who was 68 years old and had the energy of someone who had been in rooms like this for 40 years and found them, by now, almost quaint. Victor looked at Daniel. Daniel looked back. The proceedings began. The certification of the marriage condition was straightforward: 30 minutes of document review, attestations, timestamps. Daniel answered the questions put to him directly and without elaboration. He did not perform. He did not try to be charming. He simply told the truth, which was, he had learned, the most confusing thing you could do to someone who expected maneuvering. Victor's lawyers raised objections. Margaret Briggs addressed them one by one with the calm efficiency of a woman who had anticipated every single one of them. Then Victor stood up. He took his time. He was the kind of man who had learned that the pause before speaking was itself a kind of power. It made rooms wait for you, and rooms that waited for you were rooms you already half controlled. "Before this board certifies," he said, "I believe there are questions that deserve to be asked about the nature of this relationship. The timeline, the circumstances, the financial—" "Mr. Carter," Margaret Briggs said, "the financial records of my client's husband have been reviewed by this board's own auditors and found entirely unremarkable. If you'd like to revisit, I'd like to speak directly to Mr. Hayes." A pause. Then Evelyn said, "Go ahead." Victor looked at Daniel. There was something almost personal in it, as if he had expected a different kind of man and was still processing the discrepancy. "Mr. Hayes, you married my niece 2 weeks ago. Before that, you'd never met her. You have no business background, no industry connections, no he. What exactly do you bring to this relationship?" Daniel looked at him for a moment. He thought about the right answer, the strategic answer, the answer that would serve the room, manage the optics, satisfy the lawyers watching from the side wall. Then, he gave the true one. "My daughter drew a picture last week. 3 people in a house, which is what she draws when she feels safe. That's the first time she's drawn 3 people since her mother died." He looked at Victor steadily. "That's what I bring. I bring a child who's sleeping through the night again. I bring a house that feels different than it did 3 months ago. I bring the fact that every morning for the past 2 weeks, the person sitting across the breakfast table has asked Lily a question and listened to the answer." He paused. "If that's not enough for this board, then I'm not sure what you're actually certifying." The room was quiet. A board member near the window, a woman named Patricia Aldrich, who had been with the company since Richard Carter's earliest days, looked at Evelyn, then looked at Daniel, then wrote something down and underlined it. "With respect," Victor said, recovering. "That's—" "You asked," Daniel said. "I answered. The question of the board." "Victor." Evelyn's voice cut through, clean and final. "Sit down." He looked at her. She had her laptop open on the table. She turned it to face the board. "What you're looking at," she said, "are the internal communications from Carter Development's infrastructure division, years 2 through 4 of my father's illness. During that period, 6 contracts were redirected from board-approved vendors to companies in which Victor Carter holds a beneficial interest. The total value is just under $40 million. She let that settle. My father didn't know. I didn't know. His lawyers didn't know. She looked at Victor. "You knew." Victor said nothing. "The materials have been forwarded to the SEC," Margaret Briggs said, pleasantly. As of this morning, the room rearranged itself. It happened quietly at first, and then all at once. The shifting of chairs, the exchange of looks, the specific silence of people revising their calculations. Victor's lawyers leaned in. The board members, who had been watching the proceedings with careful neutrality, suddenly found things to write down. Victor looked at his niece. Something passed across his face, not quite regret, not quite fear. The expression of a man who had played a long game and discovered, at the final move, that someone else had been playing a longer one. "You knew," he said. Not an accusation. Almost wondering. "I've known for 8 months, she said. "I was waiting until I had everything." She closed the laptop. "You wanted to use my marriage as a destabilizing event. I let you, because I needed you to stay in the room until the filing was complete." A long silence. Then she said to the board, "I'd like to call for the certification vote." The vote was 5-2. She had always had 5. They drove back to Aspen that evening. 4.5 hours, the highway going dark around them, the mountains rising up in the headlights. Evelyn drove. Daniel sat in the passenger seat of his own truck, which felt slightly absurd and also exactly right. For an hour, they didn't talk. The city fell away behind them. The traffic thinned. The planes opened and then the land started to lift. Slow at first and then decisively. The truck climbing into the high country. The temperature dropping outside while the heater ran steady and warm. He watched the dark shapes of peaks appear and disappear in the cloud cover, and he thought about Lily, who was currently being subjected to his mother's baking and probably didn't mind. He thought about the conference room. About Victor's face at the end. He thought about Evelyn's voice when she said, "I've known for 8 months." The precision of it, the patience. He had grown up around ranchers and tradesmen, people who understood that certain problems required not speed, but timing, waiting until the conditions were exactly right before you moved. He recognized that quality in her and respected it, even though it must have cost her. Carrying that knowledge for 8 months while Victor circled and postured and believed he was winning. Then she said, "The custody challenge was withdrawn. His lawyers filed this afternoon, after the board meeting." "I know," Margaret texted me. She nodded. More silence. "You knew about him for 8 months, Daniel said, "and you didn't move until you had everything in place. That's how I was taught to work." He thought about that. "Your father taught you that." "Yes." A pause, which I find. She stopped. "Complicated," he said. "Very." She looked at the road. "He built me into exactly the right instrument to defeat the threat he should have seen coming himself and didn't, which is either the most generous thing he ever did or the most." She stopped again. "Both," Daniel said. "Probably both." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Lily's going to ask questions. She asks questions about everything. About us. About what this is." A pause. "About whether I'm going to be there for the next drawing." He looked at the road ahead. "What are you going to tell her?" he asked. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. "I don't know what I am to you," she said finally. "I know what we agreed to. I know the legal piece. I know the—" She stopped. "But I don't know what happens now, and I don't want to promise Lily something I don't know how to keep." He nodded slowly. "I'm not asking you to promise her anything," he said. "I'm asking you what you want." "I want—" She stopped. The exit for Aspen appeared ahead, and she took it, and for a mile she drove without speaking. Then, "I want to not eat at my desk anymore. I want to know what Gerald the Cardinal does in February. I want to read the rest of that book." She paused. "I want to not feel like I'm performing all the time." He said nothing. "I know that's not an answer to—" "It is, actually," he said. She looked at him briefly, then back at the road. "I'm not easy to be around," she said. "I work too much. I don't know how to do the small things. I didn't know how to stack wood. You know how to stack wood now. I know some things about stacking wood. That's how it starts." She turned onto the county road. The lane appeared in the headlights, familiar now, rutted and snow-packed, and hers in some way she hadn't expected. "What do you want?" she asked. He looked out the window at the dark pines. "I want Lily to finish the drawing," he said. "The one on the refrigerator." She understood what he meant. "Daniel, I'm not asking you to be Claire," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to fill in a shape that belongs to someone else. I'm asking you." He stopped. "I'm asking if you want to be there for the next one." She pulled up to the house. The lights were on in the kitchen. His mother had stayed over. Through the window, they could see Lily at the table, coloring. Evelyn sat with her hands on the wheel for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, just that." He nodded once, and they got out of the truck. Spring came late that year to the Aspen Valley. But it came. April brought mud and melt, the creek behind the barn running fast and brown, the south-facing pasture going from white to gray to the tentative early green that always seemed slightly miraculous after a hard winter. Captain and Hester stood in the thin April sun with the patience of creatures who understood that good things required waiting. Earl remained opinionated. Lily found the first crocus on the 12th of April and reported this to anyone who would listen. Daniel fixed the truck. Not just the brake lines, he replaced the water pump too, while he was in there, and Evelyn held the flashlight and handed him tools and asked questions, and he answered all of them, and by the time they were done it was past dark and they were both cold and she had grease on her coat sleeve and seemed entirely unbothered. "You're a good student," he told her. "I had a good teacher." She handed him a rag. "My jacket is ruined." "It is. I don't care." He looked at her for a moment. "Good," he said. Carter Development's board certified Evelyn's full control at the end of March, following the resolution of Victor's SEC matter. She didn't sell the company. She restructured it, brought in 2 new board members, moved the headquarters operations partly remote, established a foundation in Richard Carter's name that did the kind of community development work her father had always meant to get to. She still worked too much. That was probably permanent. But she worked differently now with a boundary at the end of the day that hadn't existed before. A line she crossed back over to come home to a house with a wood stove and a child who wanted to tell her about cardinals. She learned to bake bread, badly at first, and then adequately. She learned that Earl the pony was intelligent enough to pretend to be unsaddled when he wanted to stay in. She learned that Lily's bedtime reading preferences were strong and specific, and that any deviation from the approved list would be noted and corrected. She learned that the hardest part of having a real life was not the practical difficulties, it was learning to sit inside a moment without immediately thinking about the next one. Daniel was good at that. He'd had to learn it the hard way, and she could tell. Some evenings, the specific quiet he carried, the kind that comes from knowing that time doesn't wait, that people you love can be there one day and not the next, and that the only reasonable response to that knowledge is to be fully, deliberately, stubbornly here while you can. He taught her that without ever saying it directly. He just modeled it. Every morning at the window with his coffee, watching the light change over the valley, unhurried. Every evening, by the stove, with a book or without one, present in the room without needing the room to perform anything for him. On a Sunday in May, warm enough to leave the door open, the air smelling like thaw, and horse and green Lily came downstairs before breakfast with a piece of paper in her hand and the expression of a person who has completed a significant task. She stood in the kitchen doorway. "I finished it," she said. She held up the drawing. Evelyn was at the counter. Daniel was behind her, reaching past her for the coffee, and his hand found her shoulder in the easy way that had become unremarkable by now present, warm, without announcement. They both looked at the drawing. 3 figures in a house, one tall with yellow hair, one small with brown curls, and one new, carefully drawn, dark-haired, standing next to the tall one. Under the new figure, in the careful large letters of a child learning to write, Evelyn, not Mom, not any word borrowed from somewhere else. Just her name, which was a long name, which Lily had decided to use anyway. Evelyn's throat closed. Daniel's hand moved from her shoulder to her back. "Good drawing," he said to Lily. "I know," Lily said, with the modesty of a person who agrees with you. She went to the refrigerator and carefully removed the old drawing, the one with the undefined shape, and replaced it with the new one. The strawberry magnet held it flat. "Can we have cornbread for breakfast?" Lily asked. "We have oatmeal," Daniel said. "But can we have cornbread?" "Go get the butter," Evelyn said. Lily ran for the butter with the urgency of someone who knows a victory when they see one. Outside, the first real warmth of the year lay across the valley. The snow was gone from the lower pasture. Captain was at the fence, watching the house with the calm attention of a creature who understood that some things were worth watching. Gerald the cardinal sat on the feeder post, red as a coal, turning his head with the sharp attention of a creature who finds the world endlessly interesting. Lily had been right. He had enough seeds. He had been fine all winter. Inside, the house was warm. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from a wood stove and doesn't leave when the fire goes down. Some things don't end so much as they arrive. That winter, a woman drove a black SUV down a snow-covered lane looking for a solution. She found, instead, a home. It had taken her 34 years. It looked like a kitchen. It sounded like a child asking for too much butter. It felt like a hand on her back in the early morning, unremarkable and entirely necessary. And it turned out to be the one thing, the only real thing she had never thought to ask for, because no one had ever told her it was available.